Hello, everybody. This is Morten from Inkish. And if I sound a little bit rusty, I can't say that it's because it's been a while since I did the last online interview. So therefore, I'm even more pleased that I'm together with, I feel that I'm in safe hands because I'm together with Adam, who runs a podcast. And you do this almost every day, right, Adam?
It's getting there. I think I would love to have it be every day. And to be candid, when I first started the People of Packaging podcast with my friend Ted, we joked, do we think there's 100 people who will listen to us talk about packaging? And now we're up to 300 episodes, and it's been 6 years, and there's constant content for the packaging industry globally. There's always news happening. And so I've definitely kicked around the idea of doing this, at least from a online video podcast format, every single day, almost like an FM or an AM radio DJ. Maybe taking calls, solving relationship problems with packaging. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But yeah, it's been fun.
And besides that, I had the pleasure because the last time or second last time I was in Salt Lake City, where you are located, I think I wrote that I'm in town, so if anybody wants to join me for dinner, you actually jumped on that offer. And I think it was a wonderful evening with Paul Gardner and Diego Diaz and yourself and me and my filmer Chica. So that was like, I thought it was a wonderful evening.
It was great. Yeah. Anytime people come through Utah, if I'm here and I'm able to, I love to get out and see people in person. It's not really a huge secret, but I'll just say it anyways. I kind of hate this interaction because I've been doing it for so long. I mean, I understand why it exists. Obviously, I do a lot of it, but I prefer still to meet people in person because I think that we are communal creatures that really crave that sort of exchange of energy, or like interpersonal energy. I think is something that people miss out on. And so I go to a lot of networking events when people are here. I have friends call me and just say, hey, I'm driving through Utah. They come stay at our house. My wife and I constantly have people in and out of our home. We have 5 kids. We had somebody live with us for a year. I have friends who are Delta pilots who are like, hey, I'm stuck in Utah. I'm like, yeah, come stay at our house eat our food. Like, I don't know. That's just how I'm created and how I'm wired. So it was great to be able to meet you.
But likewise, and it's kind of fantastic because talking about when you meet in person, how different it is. It's funny. I don't know about what you feel about it, but the moment we clicked on the countdown for Riverside that we're using for this interview here, right, or this chat, it was the kind that when you get to 1, right, then our way of talking to each other changes, right? So there's like 3 ways of communication. There is like the pre-recording communication, the recorded communication, and the in-person communication, right? I've never thought about that before when you said that, but it's kind of funny because I think it is also I think that you and we are very much like we are when we are in person, right? Mm-hmm. But there is a little kind of change to how you talk and how you try to keep yourself back so you don't have too much talking over each other and things like this. But it's funny that we realize that this is kind of different ways of communicating, right?
That's such a great point. I think there's something that triggers in the brain, at least for me. It's like, this is being recorded and going on the internet and everybody in the entire world can listen to it, versus we're having a beer and some pizza and we're talking. And the likelihood that somebody's recording that is extremely low. I mean, and to be fair, if I was with somebody and I thought they were secretly recording our conversation, I probably would leave. If I had that actual fear, I would be out. I did have I had one person, this is totally true, recorded a phone call that we had, and we were just talking like a normal phone call. I didn't know. And then thankfully he reached out and he said, hey, I'm going to put this out as a podcast. And I was like, you recorded the conversation? And he said, yeah, I just find that they're more organic and real that way. And I was like, absolutely not. You can't do that without somebody's permission. That is the craziest thing ever. You have to. Yes, so there is a difference, like I try to be as like real and authentic as I possibly can be, and I hope that when people meet me in person, they're not surprised. It's hard to have a public persona and be a terrible person when you really meet somebody, I think, these days.
That's true.
Anyway,
I reached out to you yesterday because
is this being recorded, by the way? Are we recording right now?
We are on record.
Just kidding.
I know, because you knew it, and you can see the control.
I can see the countdown going.
Yeah. No, I reached out to you, Adam, because first of all, you're one of the people that I know that knows the most about packaging. So obviously honored to have you on Inkish. But secondly, it was also because there was a good reason for it, because Elon Musk, there was a statement in the podcast you did yesterday, or not yesterday, but a few days ago, where he was saying that it is kind of pointless of recycling plastic. And, being a European that have been recycling everything from cola bottles and plastic bottles and cans for since I was a kid, it came out to me as a huge provocation. And of course, Mr. Musk probably sometimes like to make provocational statements.
Sometimes would be an understatement.
I was just wondering, what is your take? I mean, as an American and also being involved in the packaging, what is your view? But let's focus on that statement first. Is it pointless to recycle plastic?
No, I mean, I don't think that as a sweeping statement that is incorrect. Because like you said, if Elon Musk has a global platform, and clearly, I mean, he owns one of the largest social media companies in the world. And when he writes things, I'm not going to sit here and say like he knows what he's doing, because he tweets constantly, or posts, or whatever we're calling it these days. But so having a global platform like that, I thought it's kind of irresponsible, but it's also highlighting, I think, an underlying issue, which is oftentimes the economics in the majority parts of the United States, the economics of recycling plastic are not good, because we are such a disparate state by state level. You almost have to think of every state almost like its own country. And so where Denmark, where you are, might be equivalent to Oregon, where Corey Connors was, and Corey was like, we've been recycling for a long time, whereas in Utah we don't have curbside recycling for glass. So I have to collect my glass, put it in a car, drive it somewhere, put it in a bin, and that does not happen all that often for most people.
So it just gets into the bins and it's not reused, basically. But
It's just thrown out.
One thing is I can tell you that some of the discussions I've been participating in Europe is I mean, I think it's a fair thing to talk about the cost of doing things, of course, and I also think it's a fair assessment to talk about whether it is competitive to, let's say, fresh materials, right? But then let's move it to the next thing. So I know that maybe also in America I don't think you have a bad agenda at all. That's not what I'm saying, but you have a different agenda when it comes to the sustainability perspective. So if you look at collecting and using plastic as a let's say, not for the economic but for the environmental thing of that, what is your point of view on that one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, here's the issue I would say with plastic is that it's like a miracle material almost. So, and I mean that in the way that it's lightweight, it's cheap to produce, and from a packaging standpoint, it has a ton of valuable properties. Now, those valuable properties also mean that when it ends up in places not supposed to, it can be highly problematic, is maybe an understatement. So this is the balance that I think we have to try to work through. So, for example, I'll see people talk about like, well, in the 1950s and 1960s, we didn't have all this plastic and we did all these things. But then you look at the global population of people living in extreme poverty was like at 60%. And obviously, plastic is not the reason why. But I do think that it's not a stretch to look at it and say the best thing that plastic can do is preserve food in a cheap level. It can transport and preserve food. And so when you have that and you enable people to get access to food, that unlocks a world of possibilities. And now it's less than 8% of the global population lives in extreme poverty. It's still 8% of whatever we're at, 10 billion people or something. No, 9 billion. I don't even know what the number is. It's still a big number. I'm not saying that it's insignificant.
No, of course not.
But so I start with like, is plastic useful and are we going to get rid of it? I don't think so. I think it's a bad idea.
But just before we continue, because I totally agree on this one. And I remember there was a demonstration. I can't remember if it was in America and Europe, but there was a demonstration. I think it was against either Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola. And that was because, there were some of these, environmentalists that have collected, I think it was Coca-Cola bottles from the ocean, right?
Yep.
And then it came to my thing is that it's not Coca-Cola that throw them in the ocean, right? It's a consumer behavior. Because, I don't know if you've been in Japan, but if you go in Japan, there's not a single, there's no trash on the streets and there's no garbage bins either. So it's just because the culture of Japan is basic. You put trash in your bag and you dispose it when you get home. When you come to India, there is no trash bins on the street and there's no culture. So they throw everything everywhere.
Yep.
And it's just to put that in perspective, because I agree totally 1000% with you that plastic and the advantages of plastic should be really, really taken into a valuable consideration. But I'm also thinking, you have 5 kids, I have 3 kids, and I'm just thinking that we also have a responsibility towards the next generation, because as you say, the problematic thing with plastic is that it can last for hundreds of years, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll give you a story about culture here, and I do want to answer the question about sustainability and kind of the agenda. But I get to travel to India a decent amount pre-COVID. I haven't been back since then. For some nonprofit work that I do in this, it's the state of Andhra Pradesh. It's this tiny town of 500,000 people called Ongole, and it's right on the beach, or it's near the Indian Ocean, and nobody lives on the beach. Like, it's not, we were talking before the show, like beachfront property in the U.S. It sounds like in Denmark and other developed, more developed countries is very expensive. In India, it's not. It's where because so much trash and debris can pile up. So, but there was one time when I was there and they said, well, don't go swim in the ocean. It's toxic right now. And I said, why is it toxic right now? They said, well, there is a festival where they have plastic elephants and they push them out into the ocean, not full size, but these plastic elephants as part of a religious ceremony or something like that. And they push them out into the ocean. And so the water's toxic. And, I share that because it's like, as an American, what do? Do I say, how dare you? How dare you put plastic into your ocean for religious ceremonies? I didn't. I just said, okay, I won't go in the water, because that's, if you have this balance of plastic with the efficacy of plastic versus what happens when it ends up in places, you also have that balance of culture and how do you go and superimpose your culture on somebody. So here in the US, the agenda is, there isn't really an agenda. There is a push and a pull between sort of, I call it the wheels of capitalism that just keep spinning.
Yeah.
And then you also have the balance of that with governmental agencies trying to keep this thing in check, whether it's monopolistic type things or EPR laws. And so it's hard to say, like, what's the agenda for sustainability here in the US, because there isn't an agenda.
Because it can be different state to state, but it can also be based on purpose, basically, right? That's what you say, right? The reason why I find it particularly interesting to talk about is that there's been a lot of discussions that is a little bit unrelated and then yet not. And it is like when you think of recycled paper, and you have, let's say, the de-inking. In North America, de-inking doesn't really happen, so
Mhm.
therefore it is not so important an agenda. Because I mean, if you look at the indigo and possibly also the lander machine, they have some kind of polyester or polymer kind of surface to it that can make it different, but that's also like a plastic thing. And I'm just wondering, because I think that I don't know if you agree with me, but I actually think that that as we spoke about the properties of what plastic can do to preserve food, to save transport, I totally agree with you. But I'm also, one of the things I do like about the agenda is that we think about how we trash our
Right.
trash. That we also try to be more concerned about, okay, how can we preserve the nature in the future by using either less plastic or biodegradable plastics that can have other properties in a longer perspective. I think that the agenda can be radical, which can be negative, and I think can be great because it creates new levels of innovation. Because there's always, if there's a demand for things, it will always create a, let's say, a demand for something that is in some way good for nature, good for economy, good for things. Because when I heard that podcast with you and talking about this statement from Elon Musk, I couldn't help thinking about that. It was like one of the first things you did in your podcast was talking about the economy side of it, right? And I
Mhm.
think in Europe, it would probably have been the sustainable side that would have been more important, basically saying that if you use, uh, if you want to use something like plastic, pay the price for it. And if the virgin, let's say, plastic is more or cheaper than the recycled, then increase the prices on the on the
Yeah.
plastic in order to encourage people to reuse things. And I think that let's say that dynamics is not a bad thing. I think that of course it can take overhand, but I think the dynamics of creating financial and ecosystems that can actually develop these new technologies is not bad for anybody.
It's definitely I think the tension is good. I think it's a healthy tension. And that's why when we look at like what's happening with EPR here in the US, it's difficult because it's so new and it's state by state and nobody's really quite sure what to do with it. Um, but there has to be an economic consideration to sustainability, or else it is actually unsustainable. Because if there's no market demand, for example, for post-consumer recycled plastics, then they will not. There's no mechanism by which you can recycle them because
100%.
there's nowhere to sell them. There's
Yeah.
nowhere for them to go,
Mm.
and that becomes a problem. Or, for example, if you follow like the resin prices, you have like clear PET is like 60% more valuable as a recycled material in the
Oh,
US
really? Okay.
mhm, than like a mixed sort of like color PET.
Okay. Wow.
Because clear PET can be sold into a market and then you can add things to it to do
Mm.
whatever you want to it. The other option is going to be like a gray or a brown or a black. And
Yeah.
so when you go to offer those, it's very limited the amount of brands who want to use those. In now, some of them are, you see like can collars are like all black HDPE can collars are made from
Mm.
100% recycled HDPE.
Mm.
So the HDPE market has a lot more value for all sorts of different colors of HDPE.
Mm.
But it's important for brands to know that. And this is where I say when somebody's going to protest Coca-Cola, for example, and they say, "No, this is on you," or "We're going to put extended producer responsibility onto the brands." It's because they can in fact design their packaging for recycling. It
Mm.
can be designed that way. So
Mm.
speaking of Coca-Cola, they changed the Sprite bottle
Mm.
from green to clear. And they
Mm.
did that because of that, what I said about clear PET.
Mm.
And the recyclers all rejoice because they know
Mm.
I can get this and I
Mm.
can create these flakes of clear PET
Mm.
and I can sell them into the market where there is demand.
But I
Same
think
thing.
that's a brilliant example where, as you say, that market is driving innovation into the right things for the planet. I can't help think about that in the 92 when the Kyoto, I think it was 92, the Kyoto Agreement was imposed, and the Americas and I think it was Australia and China didn't sign for it. I think the result was because there was a capitalistic and an incentive in it. America actually achieved more of the objectives sooner than all the countries that actually signed for the Kyoto Agreement. So I buy into that fact that you have that there needs to be financial and economic incentives in order to do that. And I also think that is an important perspective because now you are a specialist in packaging. I think that all the innovations that takes place in innovating new types of material, new types of material for packaging is interesting because I think that the next generation of packaging material will have a way higher level of considerations when it comes to the environmental perspective. I was at a conference in Stockholm just a few weeks ago, and it was a lady from Absolute Vodka, and she said that they did a test in, I think it was in London and maybe also New York, where they took the very famous vodka bottle from Absolute and made one in some kind of cardboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were because they were really nervous that if you come from an iconic glass bottle to something that looks like brown paper or brown, what would the consumer say to that? And in the test they did, actually consumers appreciated this so much that the sales were higher.
Mm-hmm.
And now the biggest problem they have is basically they cannot find anybody who can produce at scale, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, so the movements that we're talking about, so maybe Elon Musk's statement becomes obsolete by itself at some point, right?
Yeah. I mean, kind of going back to the statement and the video that he retweeted, I did watch the entire video by John Stossel, and I do think that you can't, I don't always look at these things and say it's 100% bad or it's 100% good, because at the very minimum, Elon Musk highlighted a problem, and that problem is that in most municipalities in the United States, and this was a video about the U.S. by and large, mm-hmm. We are horrible. We do not have a culture of recycling in most municipalities. And so what that means, and I've gone to these MRFs and seen it, is when the bundles come in from waste management of collected recycles from most Americans, it's filled with a bunch of garbage. Yeah. And so the cost and the time to filter out all of that stuff becomes so enormous that they just go, you know what, it is better for our company, because this is not subsidized, this isn't taxpayer money, this is a business that is buying this material, and then they have to convert it into more money than what they bought it for. And so they just go, you know what, we can't do anything with this, we'll send it to the landfills. And the point of the video was, it's not a bad thing to send it to landfills because of the way we're managing landfills today. We're doing a pretty good job.
That's totally different from the past as well. People don't always realize that. It's that has become a factory with all the capabilities of a modern plant, basically, both for
Correct.
Like utilizing and make it economically viable as part of the ecosystem, basically.
And I'll give a shout out to an organization here. It's getting started. It's getting some momentum. It's called the Consortium for Waste Circularity. Mm-hmm. And what they are doing is they're taking mixed plastics and saying, okay, we can't fix the culture, but what we can do is we can innovate. And this is where I think it's really powerful, is they're saying we can take all these plastics and we can convert them into, I think it's methanol. Mm-hmm. And so we can take it all, we can convert it into methanol using plasma gasification or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but and we can sell methanol and you can convert this into all sorts of different things, and then we can create a circle of waste. That means that the consumer doesn't have to do anything with it. They can just put it in their bin, and then we will buy it and convert it into this. There's another gentleman from Rice University I had on my podcast who was turning mixed plastics waste into hydrogen that he could sell off to the hydrogen markets, which is growing like crazy as for fuel and things like that. and graphene, which is a highly dense, strong material that's also very expensive. So he could get inexpensive plastic and convert it into two very highly useful things. And so I love that type of innovation along with the material innovation for, compostability and stuff. But to me, I don't think we're going to recycle our way out of the problem, which is, I think, what a lot of people have pointed out rightly. And I don't think that we're going to compost our way out of the problem either, because these materials are already in the world and nothing to date has shown to be better for various applications. And so to me, it's investing into how do we innovate on the collection side, and how do we make waste valuable, whether it's waste to energy to power nuclear power plants, whether it's waste into hydrogen and graphene, whether it's waste into, to me, that's the thing that's going to unlock and connect both the sustainability agenda and the economic agenda. I think is going to be at that crux of what do we do with all this stuff and how do we make it more valuable?
Adam, we are on the 26th minute now, so we are on the last question here. You work as a consultant. I mean, you worked in the packaging field for a long time, and now you're working as a consultant. I was just wondering, are you consulting for the, let's say, the producer side, the packaging companies, or for the brand owner side?
I mostly consult for people who will pay their invoices on time. That's my that's the big
go-to.
That's the go-to. Yeah. No, I mean the few companies that I have agreements with are all on the packaging production side. I do have a couple of CPG companies that are looking for help on how to get something packaged. So working with contract manufacturers, but I mean I'm only one person, and so I can't be spread out very far.
And so that the reason I was asking was because I was curious whether you see, now we've been talking about I think very interesting topics about the sustainability and how we make an ecosystem that is financially viable, and I agree with everything you said. And I was just wondering if you see in your role from both the packaging, let's say the material and the converters, and from the brand owners, do you see a change in demand that will take this in those directions that we've been talking about by itself, or is this something that needs to be forced upon brands and companies in your view?
It has to be a combination of all of them. And so there's I don't remember who said it, but I think it was a US president that said if you want less of something, tax it. If you want more of something, subsidize it. And so I do think that there is a role for things like extended producer responsibility. I don't like how it's going to be so disconnected and you just have to pick the worst and just default to that if you're a brand. But I like that is forcing some innovation. I think that there's a role for government agency. There is a role for companies to just take advantage of, like what your story with Absolute Vodka, to say, we're just going to do this because it's cool and we're going to sell more. I think that is going to happen. And then there's also a role of the consumer to be a bit more educated, to understand the products they're going to buy. And I think that's what goes back into the EPR thing, which is if we make it more expensive for people to put their stuff in problematic packaging, that becomes more expensive. We force that company to have to innovate, or their consumers to look elsewhere. And that is where I think the whole thing sort of comes together.
And to me, that sounds that me on the communication side, you on the communication and consultancy side, that we won't be unemployed any soon.
That is totally true. The other thing that I do really enjoy, to kind of wrap up the whole consulting thing, is I love public speaking. I'm a ordained minister. I've preached a lot of sermons. I've been able to speak all over the world. So that's one thing that I am looking forward to doing, maybe potentially a little bit more, is being able to go, and I've got a few events lined up where I get to go speak at the events, and I really enjoy that. And I find not a lot of people do.
I love it too, I will say, but I will basically remember this, because I think this is something that we can work on as well. So Adam, I just want to thank you very much for a very responsive and fast turnaround time for this chat here. I think it was wonderful, and I hope you enjoyed it too.
I did. It was great. Thank you so much, Morten. And I've been following Inkish for a while, and I think what you guys are doing is great. So it's really cool to see and inspirational. Honestly, it's been a big part of what has driven me to create content here in the US. So thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you very much, Adam. And by the way, I hope to see you soon in Salt Lake City again, of course.
It'll be great.
All the best.